For the last few weeks, your social media has probably been overrun with posts about him. Jeffrey Dahmer sure wasn't the most liked person on the planet, but boy, are people fascinated by him. Sure, horrific acts of cannibalism are the stuff of nightmares, but for a true crime lover, it's a dream. People are sick these days. Welcome back to Curiosity, and today we're talking about the life of Jeffrey Dahmer. Why did he join the US Army? How did this man kill 17 people? How was he caught? We're talking about all that and more, so stay tuned. First off, who was Jeffrey Dahmer? Jeffrey Dahmer was an American serial killer known for luring victims back to his home and eating them. This tactic earned him the name the Milwaukee Monster. Born May the 21st, 1960 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer was said to be a happy and energetic child. This all ended at the age of 4, when he suffered a double hernia and had to have surgery. Many believe that it was after Jeffrey's procedure that his behavior began to change. It was around this time he developed a fascination with dead animals. Add a rough family life into the mix, and you've got a potential time bomb. Jeffrey reportedly lacked attention from his parents growing up. His father Lionel was busy doing university courses and wasn't home much. This left him and his brother in the care of their mother, Joyce, who suffered from mental illness. At one point, she even attempted suicide. On the occasion Lionel was home, most of his time had to go towards caring for her. Jeffrey's family relocated to Ohio after his father earned his degree and took work as an analytical chemist. In high school, Dahmer was known for being a prankster, but these were no ordinary pranks. Jeffrey would fake epileptic seizures and pretend to have cerebral palsy. Not most people's idea of good humor. On top of that, his grades weren't the best. His teens were full of turmoil both inside and outside of the home. Lionel and Joyce were beginning to have marital issues, eventually getting divorced. Things would become even more complicated for the young boy. It was also around this time that Jeffrey realized he was gay. Given the stigma at the time, he didn't tell his parents. While this would be a sympathetic position for anyone, Jeffrey's teenage fantasies were unhealthy. He admitted to pleasuring himself to the idea of holding a male partner captive and having his way with them. He would also begin fantasizing about murder and necrophilia. Things were spiraling out of control. One teacher even spotted him in the parking lot drinking beer. When she approached him to ask what he was doing, he apparently replied that he was having a lot of problems. Due to his troubled home life, Jeffrey and his younger brother David would end up living with family members back in rural Wisconsin. 3 weeks after graduation, Jeffrey committed his first murder. The victim was a hitchhiker by the name of Stephen Hicks, who was around 19 at the time of his death in 1978. Jeffrey, who was only 18, picked him up on the side of the road one night. He lured him to the car by offering to bring him back to his place to drink beer. Like any 19-year-old in the 70s, Stephen said yes. The two drank at Jeffrey's house for hours before Stephen announced it was time for him to leave. It was here when Jeffrey grabbed a 10-pound dumbbell and bludgeoned Stephen over the head, dropping him instantly. After strangling him to death, he began pleasuring himself to Steve's dead body. His method for disposing of Stephen's corpse was fairly particular. The morning after his murder, Dahmer chopped the body into pieces and buried Stephen in his backyard. A few weeks later, he dug up the remains, removing the leftover flesh off his bones and dissolving it in acid. He would then flush the acid down the toilet. As for the bone, he crushed it with a sledgehammer and scattered it around the backwoods. The insanity was only beginning. Less than a year later, Jeffrey joined the military. In January 1979, Jeffrey Dahmer enlisted the United States Army. His father insisted it would be his best move given his excessive drinking. He clearly didn't know what was happening with his son behind the scenes. Dahmer trained as a medic at a base in San Antonio, Texas. It was here his drinking continued. Any chance he got, he would go off base and get drunk. At one point, he ended up getting his entire unit in trouble, which cost him a beating from his fellow recruits. By summer of '79, Dahmer was serving as a combat medic in West Germany. According to his superiors, Jeffrey's already mediocre performance began to decline. By 1981, his drunken behavior left him unsuitable for military service. Despite this, he was able to receive an honorable discharge, as his commanding officers somehow thought his drinking problem wouldn't cross over into civilian life. What were they thinking? Right after his discharge, he moved to Miami Beach, Florida. His choice to not head home to Wisconsin was out of fear of facing his father. Any money he made went straight to alcohol. This eventually resulted in him being kicked out of the motel he was staying at, forcing him to relocate back to Wisconsin. What you almost forgot is that Jeffrey was a murderer. In his late 20s, he graduated to serial killer. Jeffrey's return to Ohio was riddled with legal troubles and incidents of horrific behavior. He would be thrown in jail and fined for multiple drunken acts. In 1986, he was arrested for performing a sexual act in front of two 12-year-old boys. After claiming he was only urinating, his charge was reduced to disorderly conduct. In November 1987, Dahmer met a man named Steve Tuomi and asked him to come to his room at the Ambassador Hotel in Milwaukee. Once he got him inside, he intended to drug him without his consent and assault him. The next morning, he woke up to find Steve with his chest crushed in and blood coming out of his mouth. Jeffrey had killed him with zero recollection. To get his body out of the hotel, he bought a large suitcase and stuffed him inside. He dismembered the body parts at his grandmother's house and disposed of them in the trash, a process that took 2 hours to complete. The murder of Steve Tuomi sent Jeffrey on a killing spree. Over the course of the next 4 years, Dahmer murdered 15 more men. In 1989, he was arrested for having a sexual encounter with a 13-year-old boy. During his trial, Jeffrey acted in his own defense, arguing that the arrest was a wake-up call and that he was going to change his ways. The jury saw this as sincere. It wasn't. In fact, during sentencing, Dahmer killed another young man. This time, it was an aspiring model named Anthony Spears. If the court had known this, perhaps they wouldn't have let him off. Jeffrey developed a bizarre ritual for his kills. You may be wondering where cannibalism comes in. After his molestation trial, Jeffrey's kill count rose significantly. From 89 to 91, Dahmer murdered 13 people. He got away with this by consuming their flesh and disposing of their bones. He would also begin to inject a form of acid into their brain while they were still alive. In the spring of 1991, Dahmer's neighbor called the police to report a small Asian child running naked down the street. This was a boy Jeffrey had kidnapped. Dahmer was once again able to talk his way out of this by explaining that the boy was of age and his lover. Not only was the boy only 14, he was also the brother of the boy Jeffrey had been charged with assaulting years back. The police took his word for it, and even offered to escort Jeffrey and the boy home. When they arrived at Dahmer's house, they only glanced around for a moment and left. It was quite obvious they were uncomfortable dealing with what appeared to be two consenting gay partners in a domestic dispute. Not wanting a scandal on their hands, they got out as quickly as they could. Jeffrey killed the young boy and proceeded to dispose of him as he normally did. If only the police had done their jobs and looked further into the house, they may have found the remains of his latest victims and saved the young boy. So how was Jeffrey finally caught? In July of 1991, Jeffrey Dahmer was arrested after a botched attempt to lure a young African-American man to his home and take nude photos. During a scuffle, Tracy Edwards punched Dahmer in the face and left him unconscious. Edwards escaped and flagged down 2 officers who returned to Dahmer's house with him. Due to the nature of Edwards' story, the police conducted a search of Jeffrey's home, uncovering Polaroid pictures, large knives, severed heads, and a 57-gallon drum holding 2 skeletons. They also searched through his freezer, uncovering human flesh and an entire torso. The cops arrested him immediately. After examining the evidence found, the chief medical examiner stated it was more like dismantling someone's museum than an actual crime scene. Jeffrey confessed to each of the killings during his interrogation. During his trial, Jeffrey was ruled sane. He stated to the court that he didn't want freedom and wished to die instead. Unfortunately for him, the death penalty was not an option, as the state of Wisconsin abolished it back in the 1800s. As you can imagine, Dahmer's trial drew international media attention. Much of the discussion surrounded the fact that the majority of the murderer's victims were African American, which increased racial tension in the United States. Jeffrey was given a life sentence for each victim, plus an additional 941 years. He adjusted well to life in prison and was eventually allowed to mingle with the general population. In November 1994, Dahmer was killed by a fellow inmate named Christopher Scarver. He was 34. This happened during work detail, where Dahmer was forced to work with 2 other convicted murderers. Human beings are capable of doing unspeakable things. Dare to learn more? Let's keep your curiosity going with a couple more videos, shall we? Here's what you need to know. Check out The Girl Who Spent 24 Years in Her Father's Prison. Or how about The Most Brutal Ways to Punish People Throughout History? Go ahead, click one. Or better yet, watch both and learn more about the terrifying truth of human beings. Which serial killer keeps you up at night? Let us know in the comments below.